it's just kind of funny when you see your kids' friends' parents and they're all about 10 years younger. It's like no big deal. I mean, that doesn't
You're the
bother me.
wise dad that they come to for advice then.
I
You're like,
think
hey,
so.
he's got more experience. We should probably ask him.
Yeah, sometimes, I'm willing to share. People know me, I like to talk and try to help other people and kind of do my part.
What is up, everybody? My name is Drew Solon. I am the director of Dad Central Ontario and the host, co-host of the Dad Central show. But today I'm without my co-host. I'll be hosting solo, but I'm still looking forward to a great conversation and sharing just wisdom and insights that will help dads in their fatherhood journey. So as a reminder, the Dad Central show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there is a positive impact. And today we are recording just in advance of Father's Day, and we're going to be talking about something that happens the night before Father's Day, actually. So this is an interesting conversation, but something that I think will offer a tremendous amount of value for dads just at this time of year, but actually all throughout the year. So we're going to be talking today to John Francis. John Francis is the founding father of Father's Eve, which is a celebration of fatherhood that happens the night before Father's Day. It's an opportunity for fathers to connect, share, and celebrate fatherhood. And he's also a dad to two teenage daughters, and he lives in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area in Minnesota. So, John, welcome to the show. Really honored to have you here and looking forward to a great conversation.
Thank you, Drew. Great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to share and connect with you and your audience as well. Thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. In fact, you reached out to me. And so when I saw what you've been doing and I saw this celebration, essentially Father's Eve, I thought, what's this all about? Naturally curious. And then I just began to learn more, and we had a short little connection before we actually came to this point of recording. And so I'm really looking forward to it. But our typical approach to the show is we like to start by learning a little bit more about the backstory of how did you even get to this point. And so could you tell us, John, a little bit more of like what was life like for you growing up, and
Sure,
how you ended up sort of getting maybe to this point?
Sure. Well, I'm the youngest of 5 kids in my family, so I was little Johnny actually growing up, right? The youngest kid, and I had an older brother and 3 sisters, and then me. And mom and dad, my dad was a wild entrepreneur. Frankly, he was a barber and got involved in franchising and real estate and a number of different businesses over the years. So I grew up in kind of that entrepreneurial environment. And the youngest of 5, it was a different upbringing. The home I grew up in was a lot different than the home my older brother grew up in, just in terms of the house itself and the lifestyle. I guess by the time I was around, the business was already going and things had already been pretty successful. And I thought everybody owned a business or two and everybody worked for themselves except for the people that worked for us. And I thought everything was a franchise because that's what I grew up with. That's really what I knew. So as a kid, I went to a private school for high school, which was a big advantage. I didn't want to go at the beginning, but I, as an older man now, I'm grateful that I went there. I went on to college, and college was a great experience. And then I got involved in the family business. From a very early age, we were able to work. There was lots of opportunity to do a lot of things in the different businesses and help the family and help the business. And so we worked hard, and I got close to my dad. I guess I'm the lucky kid because not only did I grow up in a more successful environment, but by then my dad had realized some of the mistakes he had made with the older kids because he was gone a lot. He was working crazy and a lot of travel. And so by the time I was around, as a teenager, he had kind of recognized that, geez, I don't have to work that hard anymore. I don't have to travel constantly anymore. And so he got wiser, I guess, smarter as a dad, thankfully to me, that he was able to spend a little more time with me, and I know he was quite a bit more intentional about being closer because he had the chance to do it again with me as the youngest. So that was to my advantage. My dad had cancer. He suffered with cancer for 15 years, and he died when he was 60, so pretty young. And that had a tremendous impact on our family, not just his death, but his illness leading up to his death and passing. And then my mother took over the business, and we had made plans. I mean, we had the opportunity to prepare for things. And then my brother died in a car accident just a few years later. And that was really tragic, obviously unexpected. And he was going through some stuff. He was 10 years older than me. So he died when he was 39. And so I was 29. And I was working hard, and the business was going crazy great. Things were good. But then all of a sudden this happened. And it really changed everything for the family and ultimately for our business. My mom came back after a year of grief and getting through that process of losing her oldest after she just lost her husband, and she wanted to retire. So we wound up selling the family business. And that, of course, changed my career path. And I didn't expect that. It wasn't at all what I expected. But it turned out, again, you kind of, life goes on. You do the best with what you have at any given moment. And it was a good outcome for our people, our employees, our franchisees, and really for everybody. It just changed my career path in a big way. But it allowed me to go do other things and do things for myself. And so, I can't really change any of that. But what it allowed me to do is to make some great choices. So after we sold a business, and I realized, I was kind of stuck in a sense. I had a great girlfriend, and I was with my mom actually at a meeting, a conference. We were having dinner, and we were both missing my dad and my brother because they would have been there with us, right? It was like our business conference, and every year, everybody gets together. We were sitting there together, and I'm saying, God, I'm missing Dad, and my brother, he wasn't there. And we got to talking about it because when we talked about a lot of stuff, I was pretty close with my mom. And I realized that part of the reason I didn't want to get married is because my dad and my brother weren't going to be there, which is, just irrational grief, I guess, avoiding the grief of missing them. So I had been delaying making that commitment because I didn't want to have a wedding where they weren't there, which having that conversation with my mom kind of opened my eyes to just how I don't know what, how sad that was, and that I could really, I have to move on. Right. And you can still have a fabulous wedding, and they'll be there in spirit, and, all that. So I managed to get through that, and got back home, and my lovely girlfriend, who had been with me for 3 years, we'd been dating. So we finally got engaged, and then we got married. And it was obviously the right thing to do. Marrying my lovely wife, Janelle, was the best decision I ever made. So we got married. I was 32, so a little bit later than most guys at my age or my friends and my buddies. And then we started, trying to have family, and it turned out to be a little more difficult than we expected. So we had some fertility issues, but we got through that, and with the miracle of science and great doctors and great patients, we managed to have 2 lovely daughters. So my first daughter, Lily, was born when I was 36, and my next daughter, Anna, was born when I was 40. So I'm a little bit older dad, but it doesn't bother me at all. It's just kind of funny when you see your kids' friends' parents, and they're all about 10 years younger. It's like no big deal. I mean, that doesn't.
You're the wise dad that they come to for advice. Then, he's got more experience. We should probably ask him.
Yeah, sometimes I'm willing to share. People know me. I like to talk and try to help other people and kind of do my part. But so I when my kids were born, and we're living here in Minnesota, and I was able to choose. So I was able to create my lifestyle, I guess, where I could work from home. So again, I was in the franchising business and had my own business, a handful of stores in the franchise system I was developing, and I was a work from home dad. So when my kids were little, and I'd work when they sleep, and when they were awake, we were up and with the kids and doing all the dad stuff, the feeding and the diapers and just everything. I was a fully engaged dad, but my wife was home too, so we were both at home parents. And then I got three sisters, and my wife has two brothers, and so we had plenty of family and friends around us. We had a lot of fun growing up, and we put the kids to sleep, at like 8, 9 o'clock, and then I'd go to work, and I could do my work at night, and I'd work when they were sleeping. And then as they got bigger, I had to travel a little bit. So I'd try to travel, but keep it short. I'd travel at night. If I had to drive, I'd leave, put them to bed, and then get in the car and drive for 6 hours to Milwaukee or something and do my work. But I was always focused on trying to be as engaged with my kids as I could, because I think I benefited from my dad making that choice when he was thankfully able and willing and capable of doing that. So I recognized that from the very beginning. I said, there's no reason for me to wait. I can do this by design. So I was a very active dad and remained active with my kids, volunteering at school, and anything that they're interested in, I try to be interested in as well. And we spend a lot of time and do a lot of fun things. But it's pretty. It's not that I don't see it as anything special. I think I'm just lucky, and I'm grateful to be able to make those kind of choices and have that kind of lifestyle. So my kids. I've got two lovely girls, and they're normal, challenging kids, and they go through life just like everybody else. And we've had a lot of fun as a family. And you wonder sometimes if you could have had more kids, right? We didn't have the options, but you dream sometimes of what could have been or might have been. But I'm so grateful for what I do have, and the life we live is pretty good. We have our ups and downs and sideways too, but it's all good, man. I feel lucky, and as I go through my life, when my kids are little and I'm a husband and I'm trying to figure out what to do, what do I do? And so because my dad and my brother really obviously weren't here, I leaned on my friends, a lot of my buddies from school and from work, and my in-laws. I got a couple of great brothers-in-law and a father-in-law. That was fabulous. And so I would lean on those guys and ask them, what am I supposed to do? My wife's doing this, or my kids are doing that, or, what am I missing? What's next? So I got a lot of help from the friends and family around me. And I think that's really what kind of spawned this Father's Eve opportunity. Father's Eve kind of started as an accident. It was kind of a function of the calendar, to be honest.
John, before we get to that, I think that there's so much that you've shared that, I've written down a couple of different points. I'm like, I'd love to go a little bit deeper there. I'd love to go a little deeper there. Can we do okay if we do that before we get to the Father's Eve story?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Yeah. Well, a couple of themes that came up, obviously the influence of your father, just on your life in general, but also that choice that you talked about when you became a dad. Now, what I'm curious about is, as you were maybe experiencing, that last period with your father, being more intentional and focused on it, were you conscious of, his choices and him being more there for you? Or was that something upon reflection and when you began thinking about your fatherhood journey that it became more, you were more aware of it than one to make your own choices?
That's a great question, Drew. And I would say it's a little bit of both. So as my dad was dealing with cancer, I mentioned he had cancer for years, and that put a lot of stress on the family. And we went through a lot of stuff. And we wound up in some therapy sessions, family therapy as a group, all of us, with therapists talking about stuff that needed to be talked about because we were all going through stuff. And this came out in that therapy sessions, that time as a family where, the kids, my brother and sisters had a different experience than I did as a young, as kids in the same family,
right?
Same parents, right? Same same city, but a completely different environment and a different approach. And it came out. I mean, we talked about it. I was kind of unconscious to it, like I didn't know anything. I was just a kid, teenager, and then in my early 20s, in college and stuff, you start paying attention and you understand things better. So some of that, I became aware of it then through that family therapy, which was very helpful. Really, it was very helpful for all of us.
Just out of curiosity, John, how did that come about?
Well, we were talking about, everybody sort of had their chance to, I would say, the airing of the grievances, right? Like people are talking about what was bothering them about what was going on, and what my brother and sisters, the older sisters, had to share was a lot different than the situations I was dealing with. They didn't know him like I did, because he was gone for a lot of their formative years. I mean, like workaholic was a definition he would have fit.
Okay.
He traveled all the time and he was gone all the time. And there were some pretty sad examples of what my brother and older sisters, they didn't know him. They knew he was dad, but they didn't have the relationship with him. They didn't have the familiarity. And so they're going on about all this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's not like that at all. And they said, well, not for you, right? Because he changed. My dad, thank God, recognized the mistakes he was making and the impact it was having. And he was willing and able to change. And so he did. And like I said, I was unconscious to it. I didn't really recognize or understand it. I just enjoyed it. And then through the family therapy, when these things started coming out, I recognized, wow, that was really tough on them and tough on him, and it was really awful and really difficult and really hard on my mother, for those years that she had, she had struggled and gone through a lot of stuff together. It was hard on all of them. But again, like I said, by the time I was around, I didn't know any of that. And I didn't understand it. And why would I, right? Just a kid. But through the therapy and the conversations and trying to resolve those issues, which I think we did for the most part. I think people just, you understand, and you do the things you need to do to try to make up for it or try to recover from it. And my dad and my mom and all my siblings were all pretty reasonable people. They got willing to try to talk and heal. I don't know if that's the right word, but so that process took some time. And then, he died, right? And it wasn't much after that. It was, not long after. So I'm glad we had that time to go through some of that heavy stuff, sort of clear that out as much as we could. But then when he died, and like I said, then I figured out my piece and got on with my life a few years later and started having kids. I thought, well, this is great. I learned that lesson from him without even knowing it, right? I lived it without understanding it, but I'm glad it was made conscious through this therapy and the work around that. And then I was able to say, well, look, I'm a lucky guy. I can choose and kind of create my situation the way I want it to be. And so I was very intentional about it. And when I talked to my wife about it, before we got married, and as we were talking about our plans and our ambition and the dreams we have together as a family and what do we want to do and how do we want to do it. And I said, yeah, I'm going to be all around. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to have an office. I'm not going to have I'll travel when I need to, but I don't want to, I want to be full engaged. And she said, great. That sounds fine. And so it was a bit of both. It was the learning it as I was experiencing it through the family therapy, and then making those choices and implementing those decisions. And then now, I mean, I can tell you this, Drew, when my kids were, younger, adolescent toddlers and stuff, and they start to figure things out, and they're like, I remember one kid came home from school one day and she said, Dad, today was the day where everyone was talking about what does your dad do, at school. I'm like, oh, great. And I said, what'd you say, hon? I mean, there's some dads are like doctors or lawyers, or they work at some big company, or they do whatever they do. I mean, there's all kinds of things. I said, well, when it was your turn, what did you say? And she said, well, she said, my dad works in franchising, because she knew that. Even I don't know if she understood what that is, but she hears me say that word a lot. And then she said, he talks on the phone a lot. And I said, yeah, well, that's how I do my work is over the phone. And so anyway, it was kind of a good laugh, because I think my kids realized, that not everybody's dads are home all the time or around them, or like picking them up and dropping them off. And I was happy to do it. It was never like, oh, I can't make it, I'm too busy or whatever. It was very rarely was there an excuse. I was pretty intentional about being that dad. Volunteered at the schools, was the coach for the team, and nothing really over the top or out of the ordinary. Just I wanted to be there, and I was able to be there. So as much as I could, I would try to be engaged with them at their school and with their friends. And I don't regret any of it. I mean,
Yeah. It sounds like you were very focused on just showing up in the day-to-day moments, in the, you could say the normal, mundane, just activities of family life. That's where you were always there. When you, I guess, contrast that with what you shared from your family's experience of your father, who was working hard, doing everything he could to provide for the family and contribute, but it took him away. So he wasn't there for those everyday moments. And so that sounds like that was a big part of it. And that reminds me of a conversation we had with, I forget, Shannon Carpenter. He's the author of a stay-at-home. Yeah. And so he talked about the real takeaway was just the power of showing up as a dad and what that means. And as you said, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be over the top. It doesn't have to be like just this. It's just consistently being there and being available, and how important that is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of guys, maybe they're just unconscious to it. I don't think they intend to be gone, but they're focused on their work, or they're focused on whatever their career might be. And I felt, I could kind of do both. I certainly have a career. I run my businesses, and could I have done more over there? I suppose, but why? To me, it wasn't important. To me, being a dad and raising two kids that can be productive citizens, that's the most important thing I'll ever do. Is raise those kids. And if you met my kids, you'd say, okay, they're normal, healthy, challenging kids. They're good people. And so I know I'm not done. I mean, you're a parent for life, right? I mean, there's always more, and I'm looking forward to the next phases of their lives and my life as a dad, and maybe someday as a granddad, or who knows.
Right. Absolutely.
But yeah, it's all good.
Well, there's another part of your story that you shared that I thought was really interesting. And it was the conversation with your mom that night at the conference, and your recognition of missing your dad and missing your brother, and how that was actually going to influence basically a significant life decision.
Yeah.
We don't want to ask the question, well, what would have happened if you didn't have that conversation and you didn't recognize these feelings that were actually influencing the choice to either move forward or not. But can you talk to us about, the importance of recognizing your emotions or feelings and how that impacts your decisions?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a powerful question. I think for me at the time, after my dad died, that was a big deal, big impact for me. I was close to him, and even though we were more or less prepared, you can't really be prepared. So I went through some stuff there, and I got some great therapy. About 6 months later, I was in a comfortable state of denial for about 6 months.
It's very comfortable, that state, isn't it? Sometimes.
Oh, it was a wonderful thing. And that's just your brain protecting your ego or whatever. I don't know.
That's Cypher and Matrix, right?
But it worked, man. And so then I finally came to grips with his loss, his passing, and what that created for me was an opportunity to really get re-motivated.
Mm.
Because my motivation when he was around was to show him I could do anything he wanted me to do. Dad would say, "Can you take care of this?" I'd say, "Yeah, I'm done. I'm done." And I would go do whatever it was, anything. I would take care of it. Well, he died, and so that left. And my mom was there, but it wasn't the same. I didn't have the same kind of thing at all. It was completely different. So I had to get some clarity around that. And somebody's knocking on my door. He's going to have to wait. I apologize for that.
That's life. It happens.
Yeah. Anyway, so I got through some of that with some therapy, and I got back to work. And I tell you, I was motivated to work, and I worked really hard for a long time. And then my brother died, and all of a sudden, like, well, where'd that come from? That was totally unexpected, and that changed the situation as well. It changed a lot for my whole family. Right, he was the oldest, and pretty traditional family values and stuff. So then that changed. Well, then we kind of plowed through that and kept working hard, and the business kept going like crazy. And then my mom came out and came through her process, and then we wound up selling the business. We sold our family business, which, as I mentioned, was not at all what I had expected. But we through that, then I got clarity, I guess, to realize that life is going to throw things at you that you can't control. And the awareness of what had happened and how it had changed my life and the choices it forced me to make, right, became much more conscious. So having that conversation with my mother that night, when I realized, like, okay, they're not coming back, and I'm not going to be able to do anything with them or for them, because I just have to do it for me. And I have to do it. I can honor them in doing so part of my motivation was, well, for everything my dad did for me and my whole family, everything my brother did for our whole family, what can I do is to continue that work in a different direction. So it's not the same family business, because that's gone. We sold it. But I've got my own business. I've got my own communities, my own network, my own friends. And so Father's Eve kind of becomes a channel for some of that energy to try to do some good and help other people and try to make an impact, positive impact.
Are you a dad who feels like you're juggling a million things at once? Balancing work, family, and personal goals can be overwhelming. But what if there was a solution? That's why we created our new fatherhood community called Dad Mentor. For over 20 years, Dad Central has built practical tools to help dads. We understand the challenges you face and provide the support you need to thrive. The biggest complaint we hear from dads is there's no dedicated support for their specific needs. But not anymore. Our new community, called Dad Mentor, is here to transform your fatherhood experience. Imagine feeling in control, staying calm and patient when your children misbehave. Picture yourself connected to your children, guiding them with confidence and watching them succeed. When you join Dad Mentor, you'll have access to a community of like-minded dads committed to their dad journey, just like you. You'll also get the Dad's Roadmap. This is a step-by-step plan to help you go from unsure to unstoppable as a dad. Monthly masterclasses and Q&A sessions. You'll get answers and know exactly what to do straight from experts. Monthly group meetups that connect dads over common topics. A dad's resource library. Curated webinars, podcasts, or guides built by Dad Central to help you grow as a parent. And finally, you'll also get exclusive members-only offers and events. Now, many dads do try to do this fatherhood thing alone, only to find themselves trapped in frustration and strained relationships. Then they may turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms like drugs, alcohol, or other distractions, leaving their family and their own well-being at risk. We don't want you to reach that point of regret. Take steps to invest in you and your family today. Join Dad Mentor and go from stressed, tired, and overwhelmed to confident, calm, and connected. Join us today by going to dadcentral.ca/dads. Well, let's talk more about Father's Eve then. And, how did Father's Eve start? And then maybe share with us some of the impact it's having and maybe your long-term vision. What would you love to
Yeah.
see for Father's Eve?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Drew. So Father's Eve really started as sort of an accident, right? When the recession of 2010, 2009 and 10, and the Great Recession or whatever came through, um, my wife and I, our kids were both around and they're growing, and our little family was growing, and we were outgrowing our house. So I said, this would be a good time to buy, a bigger house because everything was on sale. So we bought a bigger house in St. Paul, big old house that had been remodeled, but the garage was terrible and had not been remodeled. So I said, well, we can buy that house if I can build a new garage. And so we got a contractor in there and we knocked down the garage, and I built a really nice garage. And in Minnesota, you guys probably haven't, we got winter here.
Yeah,
so
winter.
we
Absolutely.
need a real garage, and I want to put all my stuff in one place. And so it had great heat and the floor drains, and it had everything I wanted, right? It was really nice, great thing. I got to build my garage. So the next summer, it's done, and I'm trying to figure out when I can show it off to my buddies, right? Because why wouldn't it, right? Come on over. I want to see where we moved. We didn't move too far. We moved 2 miles away. So, but I want my friends to know where I live. So I'm talking to my wife, and we're trying to plan a Friday or Saturday night when I could just have some buddies over to show off the garage. And back in those days, you'd turn the calendar, right? It was a week at a glance, right? You'd flip the calendar. So we're flipping the calendar, looking for Friday, Saturday. Everything was busy. It was busy summer, and the kids and everyone was running around. Finally found an open Saturday night in June. And I said, how about this one? And she says, yeah, okay, that looks clear. And I said, good, well, that's it. And I turned the page, and the next day is Father's Day. And I said, well, that makes it Father's Eve. Like, we're going to call it Father's Eve. And so I invited a bunch of buddies over. Come on over. We're going to break in the garage. And so we had about 20 guys over. They say we had 3 cases of beer and 2 bags of chips, and nothing. I mean, we didn't do anything. We didn't have anything. Garage was mostly empty, but it was done, so we threw a bottle against the wall to break it in, and my wife and kids had left. I said, you got to leave. For me to really relax, I need to know that you're not here, right? And so she was pretty understanding, and she's like, okay. So she went down to her dad's house, and her dad came up to the party, right? Which is great. So it was me and my buddies just hanging out one night. Like I said, the music was just a little too loud. It was just perfect. We had nothing going on. And but they said it was a lot of fun, man. Let's do this again. Let's do it again. And it was a way for me to say thank you to those friends and family who had helped me with my fatherhood and fathering and learning how to be a better dad. One of my good buddies, Mike, he has 2 girls, same, but they're about 5 years older than my kids. So I would learn from him, like, here's what he's telling me about his kids. I'm like, oh, okay, that's coming. That's just a few years away from me. So I got a lot from my buddies and friends and family on fatherhood and techniques on how to handle situations and deal with things that come up. So the Father's Eve was kind of a party for me to give back to those guys and show off this great garage. So we came back the next year, and now it had to be Father's Eve. So it had to be that Saturday night. And it about doubled, right? Now there's about 50 guys showed up, and we had food and we had games, and we had planned a little better, and more guys. We had a lot of fun. And we did it again the 3rd year. It was out of control. So there were guys that I didn't know. And I thought, this is great. My buddies are bringing their other buddies to this party because there's nothing going on and everyone wants to come together. And we were just having a good time. So that year, someone challenged me. They said, what are you going to do with this Father's Eve thing? And I'm like, what do you mean? What's wrong with this? And they're like, you could do some good with this. You understand business and the franchise thing. What are you going to do with this? Why don't you do some good? Okay, well, we'll think about it. So a lot of those guys were friends of mine. We go hunting and fishing and snowmobiling, and we do stuff like that. So we talk about this. I said, well, if we're going to do something with the Father's Eve thing and turn it into something, I need help. I'm not doing this alone. I need you guys to help me. I'm not, what do you think? And so, okay, so I got a few guys to sort of commit to help me with this. We moved it to a bar, and we moved it, just a mile away from my house, and we made it a fundraiser for charity. And one guy had the media; he was in the PR business, so he got us in the newspaper and got us on TV and got some momentum and got some visibility. Another guy was an event guy, so we had all the planning and all the logistics and all that. He knew how to do all that. And other guys would just kind of shake the trees and beat the bushes and get donations and contributions. And we're not a nonprofit. We're just having fun, right? There was nothing structural to it. We raised $10,000 that first time, and we split it between two charities. So we gave it to two local charities. We had a lot of fun, and I knew I was on to something, like, oh my gosh. So I went back to my my business lawyer, and I said, what do you think? He said, well, you can't franchise it. There's no economic model there. There's no business there. It's one night a year, and you're not generating any revenue, or you're not really, accomplishing anything. I said, well, yeah, we are. It's guys coming together. And he said, well, you could trademark it, and then you could license a trademark, and you can give it away if you want. And maybe someday, it'll get bigger and you can scale and have some fun with sponsoring. Right. So we did that. So that big party was 2015, was the first time we printed T-shirts and we sold tickets, and it was a fundraiser. We made a fundraiser. We gave all that money away. Then 2016, I went to a conference called Dad 2.0. Someone had told me about this, and I'm like, what is this? And I didn't know anything about it. And I read about it. I signed up and I went, and I showed up. I printed some business cards. So it didn't take me long to make some friends. I found the biggest guy in the room and bought him a beer. Said, hey man, I'm Johnny from Minnesota. Can I buy you a beer? He's from Chicago. I'm like, oh, great. So we get along. And what are you doing here? What's your deal? He was with the City Dads group. Okay. And he was an organizer in Chicago. I'm like, what's City Dad? What's that all about? So he's telling me all about it. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, where have you been? You're the guys doing what I've been trying to do. And because I had an email group of my dad buddies, like, hey, we're going to the car show for this, or we're going to the sport show. We're going to this game over here. We'll see you there. So I got to know those guys, and I got to know the At Home Dad Network. They're there, and they are a charity. They've been around for a long time. I got to know a lot of other people and influencers. I didn't know what an influencer was. I had no clue. I mean, I really didn't know much, but I knew I had something with the Father's Eve thing. So from that Dad 2.0, that was 2016. Then I started kind of putting the wheels on this thing and putting it out there. So I connected with those groups and got involved with them. And then I just kind of put the structure to it. And a lot of my friends around the country from work and from school and stuff, we did it in 12 cities in 2016. Wow. And that's when we knew we really were on to something. So we kept kind of pushing it. And it every year it just about doubled, right? So 16, 17, 18, we were getting some real momentum. In 2019, we were in 60 cities. Wow. Around the country, a couple in Canada and one in Mexico. And we'd had a guy in like Costa Rica, some American and expatriate down there had found us, and some guy in Scotland wanted to do it. I'm like, sure, whatever. And it's all free, right? No one's paying anything. It's all volunteers. There's no credit cards or no one's doing anything economics. It's just out of having fun, try to have some fun, get guys together. So I learned from those years that Father's Eve, there's a need out there for guys to connect. And what I learned is what I take for granted, right, with my friends and getting together and doing the stuff that we do. A lot of guys don't have that, and they get too busy on their work, or they get too focused on something else, and they lose their connections, and they lose their social network in a real sense, not just the online stuff, which is a whole nother thing. But so we decided that there really is value here in getting guys together, and then so we said, well, we got to make it fun. It's got to be fun, or I'm not doing it. So we added the countdown toast. We said, well, on New Year's Eve, everybody knows you wait till midnight and you count down at midnight, 10, 9, 8, 7, all the way down, and the ball drops and you go crazy at midnight. So we back that up to 8 o'clock on Father's Eve because I got to go home by 10 o'clock. I want to be in sleep by 10:30.
Right.
I don't wake up for Father's
Especially the new dads who aren't sleeping at all at night.
Yeah, you can't. We're not going out late. So we made an 8 o'clock thing. So 8 o'clock local time, we started doing this countdown toast, which was just hilarious. Just fun.
Yeah.
And then when COVID came through, of course, in 2020, I guess it stopped everything. And my lawyer's like, don't do anything. I'm like, what do you mean? He said, if somebody goes to Father's Eve and they get COVID, and now you're responsible because you created the thing. He's like, tell them to not do it. And I'm like, oh, you're killing me, So we went back to my garage, had my buddies over. We all wore a mask, took a picture, then threw the mask away and had a great night. And it was just us, just a small group of guys. But what we did is we turned on the online computer. Someone told me, well, you can stream this. Like, what's that? How do you do that? So we turned on a computer, and there were a few other guys that wanted to get together. I said, well, wherever you are, 8 o'clock, we're going to do the toast anyway. So come in on I guess it was Zoom or whatever, something like that, Facebook Live, or I don't even know what we used. Anyway, so we kept going with it.
Yeah.
So in 21, we had a few more guys. COVID was still a thing, and people were kind of hesitant, but we had a few guys come back. Then last year for 22, we had it again, a bigger event. We made it a fundraiser again, and we had I don't know, 15 or 20 cities around the country. Guys are coming back, and some of them are, again, they're all volunteers, same kind of format.
Right.
So this year for 23. We're doing the same thing. Now we know how to do the online thing. We're all getting comfortable with that. And we have a big event here in Minneapolis, and I think we have about 20 or 25 around the country. And they're all, in various places. A lot of them are the city dads guys because they're groups of dads meeting anyway.
Right.
So this makes a lot of sense for them. It's other groups too. There's a bicycle club out in Vancouver. I think they're doing it again. There's a church group in Texas that does it with their group of guys, and so it's groups and people and it's pretty simple, which is on purpose. It's intentionally simple. I say we're not selling anything, we're not buying anything, we're not taking sides, we're not trying to solve anyone's problems. We're not really. Our mission is just to have some fun and get together. And we know that dads can make a difference. And so what we really do when we get together is, I say, we connect, share, and celebrate fatherhood. So the connection is just being there. And the most rewarding thing for me, Drew, has been seeing guys come back to Father's Eve. They show up and they don't know each other. Maybe they bring their buddy. I say, bring your buddies or come make some new ones, Mm-hmm. So they'll show up, and by the end of the night, they've met other guys and they're having some fun. We do a bags tournament, where you're throwing the cornhole bags, and so we do that because I can hold a beer in one hand while I'm playing that game. So we play bags, and guys pair up, and we have a tournament thing, and they fight for this trophy that's like 2 inches tall. It's hilarious, but we
and
have
bragging rights, which is bigger.
Yeah, that's right. So we have some fun with that, and guys get to know each other, and by the end of the night, they're buddies. They're like, hey man, this was really cool. And then I see them come back next year, and it's like, hey, how you doing, man? Nice to see you. They've stayed in touch over the year, or they certainly are remembering each other from last year. And so creating those friendships, creating those connection points is really magical. I think it's really kind of fun. And then the way we share is, I tell stories, or I ask people to tell stories.
Right.
Like my kid went to college here a couple of years ago now. She's in school a couple of years. And I said, I'm asking the older guys, like, what did you do when your kid went to college? What was important? What's not important? What would you, what should I be paying attention? Whatever. I can figure a lot of things out, but why not ask a guy who's done it 2 or 3 times? Like, what would you do? What not to do? So we get guys to tell stories. Tell me about, your dad win, something you did that you're proud of that worked great with your kids or your wife or whatever, or something you regret if you're willing to share something that didn't go well or you screwed up. And and we can learn from that. I would say to a dad, his kid is like 5 or 6, I say, let me tell you how I taught my kid to ride a bike. Right. Here's how we did it, and here's what worked, and maybe here's what didn't work. And, make sure you put a helmet on them or whatever, you're just sharing ideas and telling stories is how we get guys to share their fatherhood, their points of influence, and then the toast, the celebration is really the 8 o'clock toast that we do in every local time zone, 8 o'clock local time. And it's so much fun because guys are like, oh my God, we're celebrating Father's Day. Because we used to say, I love Father's Day so much, right? Father's Day is for dads and families. So I'm going to be with my wife and kids, and we're going to run around and do our stuff. But I want Father's Eve for the dads, just for the dads, because the dads should connect and share. And what I've learned, Drew, is guys come away from this with just a little bit of understanding or awareness on how to be a little more intentional about how to be a better husband, how to be a better dad. I tell the story about losing my patience, right? When the kids were little, man, I had no patience, and it was a problem for me, like real. And all of a sudden I'm like, why am I doing this? And so I asked my buddies, man, how do you keep it cool when your kids are pushing your buttons, and they're driving you nuts? And I would lose it, and I regret it, and I'd say things and do things. I'm like, what are you doing? Who are you? That's not who I am.
Right.
And so I had the awareness, and I had the chance to get some help and get some advice. And I made that shift pretty quickly. Thank God. It didn't go on and on for a long time, but it was enough that, I learned, and I wanted to be a better example for my own kids, because they learn, whether you're aware of it or not, they're picking it up. Someone told me your kids are going to learn from you, whether you like it or not. I said, shit, I better get it right then. I really, so that's part of it, is just letting guys realize that just a little improvement in your attitude, or stop doing this bad behavior, or find a different way to make an impact that's more positive or meaningful. I think just having those conversations and giving those examples in real life, and real simple, not real complicated stuff, real simple, practical stuff. And guys tend to resonate, and I get good feedback. I'll tell you this quick story. There was a group in, I think it was in North Carolina. This was a few years. It was just getting started. So it might've been 2018 or something. And the guy called me the next day on the Monday after Father's Day. And then by the way, I say, send pictures. I want to see pictures. If there are no pictures, it didn't happen. Right. So I asked everyone,
the proof. Absolutely.
Take a picture, take a video, share it, send it over, and we'll put it all over our website and stuff. And so a guy called me, and pretty sure it was North Carolina. And he said, look, I just want to tell you what happened. I was like, go ahead, man. What happened? He said, well, we showed up at this restaurant, some bar restaurant. He said there were 5 guys, and we didn't know each other. But we figured out, well, your Father's Eve, you're here for Father's Eve. Yeah. So whoever was the host must have had like a logo or something on a sheet of paper, simple. Okay, Father's Eve. So they sat, these 5, this one guy called and said these 5 guys sat down and talked for 3 hours. I said, no way, that doesn't happen. He said, no, really, we because we didn't know each other, we felt like we could share everything, right? We didn't know, and there was no holding back. So it took a little while for these guys to get going on their conversation, but they had a great conversation. He said, we shared and we learned and we got connected, and we all shared phone numbers, and we're all buddies now. Like, we're really friends. Like, we're going to talk again and again and again. And he said, that wouldn't have happened without Father's Eve. So I said, well, look, man, all I did was put it out there. I said, whoever the local guy was, made it happen. He said, well, you created it so he could create it. And now I'm telling you that it's valuable. And thank you. He was grateful. And so I couldn't believe it. I'm like, wow, it really is making a difference out there for at least that guy and the guys he was with that night. And so I think the same opportunity is real. I say we create a judgment-free environment. Yes. Where a guy can just show up and engage as much or as little as you want. right? There's no expectation really whatsoever. There's no speech. There's no program. There's no
Yeah.
membership. There's none of that stuff. It's just show up and be who you are, share what you want, learn what you want, have some fun. Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's very simple. I've had people say, well, what's the catch? I'm like, there is no catch. What do you mean? They're like, well, there's got to be something. I'm like, no, nothing. You want to buy a t-shirt, go ahead, but I don't care, do it or not. I mean,
Right.
There's no catch, there's no commitment. There's no expectation other than
which is really interesting though. Right. And I think that's a function of, unfortunately, kind of the world we're in now, where if you're doing something, there's got to be something in it for you, and like, can I trust? The lack of trust is a real challenge, but that's a whole other conversation, a whole other time. But so, John, I just want to say thanks so much for sharing your story and the impact that Father's Eve is having. The theme for me that's really crucial is the value of being connected to other dads. I really love the part when you talked about, I had these, dads around me, and I didn't have my dad. I didn't have my brother, who I've normally gone to, but I did talk to my friends, and I asked them questions, and I wanted to know and I think that's a really important, because many dads may either not have the network that you had to be able to ask it, or they may shy away from even asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
You strike me as someone who's always willing to learn and not worried about, asking questions because you want to learn. Whereas I think many dads struggle with feeling like they have to have all the answers. And if they don't have the answers, then there's something wrong. It's not okay for them to ask those questions. It's not okay for them to be vulnerable. And so the fact that you did that, it's added so much value. And then you've created a space for dads to come with no expectations, but they'll hear a story, and that story, even if they don't even say anything, that story will spark something for them or tweak something for them. And then they can take that and they can think about it, and they can even apply it into their own context, wherever that is. And so there's so much. What I take away is the value of being connected to other dads and just hearing their stories, and being able to ask a question or two if you want, and maybe get some advice from somebody who might be a little bit ahead of you. You referenced your friend whose daughters are 5 years older than you. You got that resource. So anyways, I could go on, but it's been really valuable. So thank you, John, for sharing your story and sharing the story of Father's Eve. And to me, I'm looking forward to celebrating Father's Eve this year and many years forward as well. And I hope that if you're listening to the show, that you get connected to Father's Eve. And so, John, I think we've got basically the best place to go, fatherseve.com. Any last words you want to share before we end the show today?
Well, Father's Eve I say it's fun, it's free, it's Father's Eve. You asked, what's my vision someday? I think this becomes sort of an unofficial holiday that people just do, like now people say, oh, New Year's Eve is coming up. What are you going to be, where are you going for New Year's Eve? What are you going to do? You're going out, you're going to have some party or go with friends or whatever, New Year's Eve. I want the same thing to happen with Father's Eve for dads. Like, hey, Father's Eve is coming up, man. Where are you going? Where are we coming to your house? You going to my house? Where are we going to go? What are you going to do for Father's Eve? So I want it to become like that, just automatic. It's a function of the calendar. It just sort of happens. My vision is this thing gets big enough, and maybe we have some fun with some sponsors who wants to be the official, whatever of Father's Eve. We can get to that level. I think this will take 20 years to become an overnight success, but that's my goal. Is it just keeps going. It's kind of organic and kind of natural. We're trying to keep the conversation going after Father's Eve. I mean, it's been very seasonal. We get busy and we ramp up, and then we have our thing, and then we shut it down and we kind of forget about it. And so now we're trying to be a little more continuous, because what I've learned, Drew, is there's groups like yours and lots of other fatherhood groups around the country and around the world that are really doing some great things. And so I think what Father's Eve will do, and what I would call sort of the off season when we're not busy with our own events, is just try to bring those other groups together and share and connect the dots with all these groups and people and organizations. Man, there's a lot of good people doing great work for dads. And a lot of people don't know about it just because they're disconnected and I think it's just an awareness thing. So we're going to try to help keep those conversations going through our social media and through our website. And then, the idea is that Father's Eve comes around and we'll do it all over again. And I think this thing will just continue to grow and grow. And at some point it'll reach a tipping point where it just happens automatically.
Absolutely.
Naturally.
And that would be a pretty remarkable sight to see and something I'm looking forward to. So,
Yeah.
John, been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Drew. I appreciate the opportunity. Reach out to you and the Dad Central group, man. It's a lot of fun. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure. And again, if there's anything that we can do to help support all through the year, because as my co-host likes to say, there are 364 other days of the year when fatherhood still matters, other than Father's Day. All right. Thanks, John.
You bet.
All right. So thanks so much for listening to the show this week. It's been a great opportunity to learn from a father who's ahead of me. And there are many things that I've taken from John that I would love to, just think on, but also be able to apply, especially the value of connecting with other dads who are ahead of you and asking questions. The other power of just being together with other dads and creating friendships that matter and offer meaning to you. So that's a real important takeaway for me. So as we wrap up today's show, I want to remind you that the Dad Central show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there is a positive impact. Also want to remind you that we at Dad Central have a variety of resources to help support you in your fatherhood journey. And so you can always access all of our resources at our website, dadcentral.ca. If you want to catch other episodes of the podcast, you can do so at dadcentral.ca/podcast. And of course, we love hearing from you. So please give us some feedback, send us a message, give us some guest recommendations, and you can do that by contacting us at podcast@dadcentral.ca. So as we wrap up today, I will use my co-host phrasing and say thanks so much. And remember to give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy.